You were living your American dream.
And there was a piece of my brain that just said, no, no, no more of that. I'm not doing that.
You will be yourself. No, no, no. You are a perfect example how you can change your life if you only want to change.
I wanted to share people's journeys and the good parts and the bad parts. You have to be okay to be bad at something.
It's very serious things, but you talk, it's like a child, you know?
Happiest may not be pleasurable in the moment. They might be really, really difficult.
So happy of this process, and
People feel empty and unhappy, and it's also killing the planet.
now you are a writer, right? Like
Yes.
Yeah, you're a writer. You weren't writer before, yeah? As you said, you were living your American dream, yeah?
Yes. Yes. So, yeah. So I grew up, my parents were divorced when I was very young. I was only 5. And so that all of a sudden made money like a big, scary thing. Like my mom was working, 60 to 70 hours a week, just to have enough money. We were never hungry, but she worked really, really, really hard to make sure that that was the case. And, as a kid, we watch what our parents do, and we watched that as an example. So my mom should have either been an artist or a scientist. She had deep passions for both. She always was drawing, and like sometimes when we were little and she'd make my lunch, she would draw special pictures. We use these paper bags to carry our lunch to school. So if it was a holiday or a birthday, she would draw a really neat little picture on there in the couple of minutes she had before we had to go to school or work or whatever. They were always really special. And then she was also very passionate about plants and animals and the natural world. And so I think she could have been really good at either, but she didn't get to go to college. And so then all of a sudden she's divorced and was working as a secretary, which is totally fine, but that wasn't her passion. So that's what I saw. I saw that you have your passions that you do in your spare time, and the rest of the time you work and worry about money. And so I grew up, and that's what I did. I became a financial planner, which means I helped other people, trying to help them not worry about money. And so I put aside all the things about myself that I was really passionate about, thinking, well, I'll do those one day. I'll do those someday when I'm done working, and when I have enough money, and when I've raised my kids and all the things. So yeah, I just put my head down and just kept not being myself and doing the things I thought I was supposed to. And that involves, the American dream is like you get a house and you get cars, and then you fill your house full of stuff. And then there's that great line from, I don't know if you saw the movie Fight Club,
No,
but he says, yeah, there's a line in there. He says, the things you own you. So all this stuff that I had was, then I had to work hard to get the stuff, and then I had to work hard to take care of the stuff and fix the stuff and replace it. And so suddenly I just had no time to do, anything that felt enjoyable or passionate or motivating or exciting or, And so, I was going along, and I would still be doing that. But then I went through this period where in about a 4-year period, my parents both died. They got sick and got cancer and died really quickly. And then in between there, I was divorced myself. And sometimes it takes, something like that to make us stop and think. And the pain and darkness from all of that, I would never ask for it. And even it's like, I never would have asked for it, even knowing what I got from it. But what it gave me was some time to sit and think and ask questions and slowly kind of rebuild my life to do the things that felt meaningful to me, especially knowing how short life was, knowing my parents, they were 70 when they died, but my grandparents lived to be in their 80s and 90s. So I thought they'd be there, another 10 or 20 years, or with modern medicine, maybe longer. So that was a shock that woke me up. And then I became aware too, because of therapy. I'm like, oh, well, I'm doing all these things because of watching my mom. My kids are going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that puts some extra pressure on me to think, well, if they don't see me being myself, they'll never learn to be themselves. So that's what the story I told in the book was, just how the little things, that it wasn't just an overnight thing. It was a 7-8 year process of learning to say yes to things that I was curious about and interested in. And then each thing that I said yes to opened up another little door, another little pathway, and I met a new person. Just us sitting here today wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, have you ever thought that you could to write your book, to inspire people, to talk to people around the world and to interview them?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought that you can do that?
7-8 years ago, that would have seemed absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
That just would have not ever crossed my mind. But as I kept, I post-divorce, and I moved into my own place, and I told the story in the book how I needed furniture, but I didn't like what I was finding, or the things I found that were interesting were absurdly expensive, and they were furniture made out of old, reclaimed lumber and interesting pieces of wood and metal. And I was talking to a friend, and they're like, well, maybe you could do that. I'm like, well, maybe I can do that. And I had never done anything like that. So I made my table and my bed and all kinds of things for my house. And that was very healing to realize, oh, and I was like, one day I was like, I guess that's art. I was like, I guess I'm making art, and I like it, and it's fun, and it makes me happy, and it's done when I like it. I'm not making it for anyone else but myself. And that felt really, really good. And it was like that led to me doing some theater, and led to me doing all kinds of other things that, when the more of those I did, then one day it occurred to me, I'm like, well, maybe I could write a book. Maybe I'll tell my story. And so I couldn't have done that 7 years ago without having had all the experiences of trying new things and learning and growing from those, if that makes sense.
You say your story step by step, how you find yourself. It's very interesting, first of all, you find your inner child, you can create something, and it's very interesting process. And after you find your style, you find your a family language. You start to learn Italian language, right?
Yeah.
And you go to Italia and to find that place where your grandparents from. So it's very interesting, and it's like your journey, to find yourself. Your book is done, and maybe you would like to share another, insights, or maybe something. What do you think about it?
Oh, what I want to do next, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Two things. Well, one, I want to, so I didn't write my story so that I could be a coach. I don't want to, sometimes people write a story like that, and it's okay. But I mean, they have a coaching business, and they want people to hire them to show them how to do whatever it is they want to do. And that wasn't my intention. I just wanted to say, this is what I did, and I never thought it was possible. And you can, whatever it is you want to do, you can and should, if you want to. So that's why I wrote it. And then that led to the podcast where I was like, well, I want to talk to more people that I think are doing interesting and beautiful and fun things and saying yes to their dreams, because so many people have been excited about, friends or people I met were excited about what I did, but they're like, well, I could never do that, or I'm too old, or I'm not old enough, or whatever the excuses are we tell ourselves. And so I just want to, at this point, just as I've gone through my journey, I keep meeting interesting people like you and other people that I've met along the way that are just doing fun things, and they're good examples for people. So part of me wants to just keep exploring other people's stories to help give more examples for anyone that is interested. And I want to write more about some of the American dream stuff that this endless quest for materialism is not leading to happiness. If anything, it's leading to emptiness. And at a personal level, it's people feel empty and unhappy, and it's also killing the planet. And so whether, living more simply makes us more free. And I want to dive into some of that, if I can, in a way that's hopefully helpful for people.
You have an intention to coach people, yes, but your book, you write your story, and from this story, people can take like a lessons to themselves. Like, you are a perfect example how you can change your life if you only want to change it, and American dream doesn't mean like you're happy. That book, it's really inspired me, because the style when someone write a book like a coach, like coaching, it sounds like you can live another life and you can change this life, but it seems like somewhere very somewhere, but not here. But but when you write in simply way, like it's your story, and now I know you and I read it, and like it's like my friend write, you got me.
Yeah. No, thank you. It was I had never written a book before. I had not written anything longer than a long email since I was in college, when you get out of, I always liked to write in school, but it was just, it's funny sometimes when we're young, the things that come easy to us, we don't value. Like, I liked to write. I loved art history. I loved history itself. And I just thought I did well in those classes because they were easy. I didn't realize that, I like them and maybe I'm good at that, or, I can do something with that. And so when I wrote, first of all, it was kind of vulnerable to write that, because it's one thing to write it down, but then the idea that anyone can read that was interesting. So I just tried to write it like I was writing to a friend and to a person that I know, and like, this is my story and this is what I learned, and hopefully this is helpful for you. So that was my intention.
I told you that I had some, insights from this book, and one of them was like how society affects us, like people, like, as you said in your book, like from our childhood, our parents often tell us like someone is watching us, like first of all, it's Santa, first of all, God watch you, like, and if not God watching, so Santa do. So like, my God, it's so true. Like, you must be a good boy, you must be a good girl, because someone is watching you, and if you will not a good, or you will be yourself. No, it's wrong.
Yeah, that gets in your head, man.
Yeah, and we always want to be someone else, but not not who we are in your inside. Like we, like we restrict our emotions and our, our inner child. So it was, yeah, it was so strong. Like, yes, I even noticed this phrase. I noticed actually a lot of phrases from your book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really, because I told you that when I read this book, it's like, my God, it's so similar to mine. I can write it in my Instagram like a post from your book, because a lot of things very similar, like how art affects us, how society affects us, how can we find our inner child, how we do things which we want to do, and so on, like how to try things what we haven't tried before, and so on. So yeah, a lot of phrases. Like, I understand why you invited me to your podcast now, because our story is very similar. Like, from this point, like we lived a life before and after, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Carlo, maybe you remember that, how to say, bifurcation point, yeah? Like when you were living your American dream life, and when you like wake up and understand that that's all. I can't live anymore like
That
this.
way.
Maybe, do you remember this situation?
Well, I remember I was doing yard work one day. And I was like, we had this yard, and like, that's a big thing, like raking the yard and mowing the grass. And I remember just stopping, and I was tired and dirty, and I was doing all the work of a farmer, but not making any food. Like with a yard, it's just grass that you throw away and leaves that you throw away.
Yeah.
And I remember one moment just pausing and thinking, just all these thoughts poured into my head of all the things I would rather be doing. I'd rather have been reading and studying. And at that point, I knew I had wanted to learn Italian for 20 years, but I had never had the time to do it. And I just thought, this is so dumb. I don't like this. It's not fun. I could have 3 PhDs for the amount of time I've spent doing this mindless work. And I looked around at my neighbors, and they were all doing the same thing. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But at that moment, I didn't see any alternative, because I had a family, and that's what, I was married, and that's what my wife wanted. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And I just put my head back down and started working again. So there was many moments like that where I started to think, this is insane, and I don't know a way out. And then I think I told this story in the book that I stayed at my brother's house for about 2 months before I got my own place, after I moved out of the house where I was living with my family to decide what I wanted to do. And I remember laying there one morning before I got up, and I was trying to imagine, like, well, what am I going to do next? And I started imagining buying another house near my old house. And I was starting to think about, well, what kind of house can I afford, and what would it look like? And I suddenly had an image of myself like on a ladder cleaning out the gutters. Like, what that, the whole thing. Okay. So I saw myself doing that, and there was a piece of my brain that just said, no more of that. I'm not doing that ever again. So in that moment, I didn't see exactly where I am today, but that was like a fork in the road. Like, okay, I'm going to simplify my life. And then when I simplified my life, that opened up space and time for me to start doing these things. And each thing was just like a little stepping stone that led to the next, to the next, to the next. But had I gone the other direction and bought another house, then right now, instead of us talking, I'd be cutting the grass and raking leaves, because I'd have all this stuff I had to do.
Yeah.
So
You're working for stuff, and after you must like to live for stuff and to work to repair this stuff, and yeah, like
yeah,
so
it's endless. It's endless. And the more stuff we have, the more we have to take care of. And then you have to pay for it and fix it and repair it and clean it and organize it. And, you know, then like when we travel, you take such a small amount of things. Like you have, you know, 2 pairs of pants and some shorts and whatever you need. And if you're in a hotel or a bed and breakfast, you don't have to fix anything and you don't have to clean anything, and you just have your clothes and your food, and then you just do things. And it's so simple and free. And I think a lot of people understand that, but then they go back to their homes that's comfortable, and society makes you feel like you have to have certain things.
yeah,
You know,
you
have to have.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to.
So
It's like you know, it's like a definition of success, you know, your house, your family, your work and your job, I mean, and so on. Like you know, it's like it must to define you, like you like a person, but it's not true. It's not true.
You know, for example, especially Americans, most people I know, they believe, especially where I live, they believe you have to have a yard. But then we don't use, and I think that comes from like, you know, when Americans were living like as farmers, and my grandparents were farmers, and my parents had a yard and they grew things. And now I don't know very many people that grow things anymore, but they believe they have to have a yard. Well, when I got rid of my yard, this is another interesting thing. So I got rid of the yard, and I freed up hundreds of hours per year of time. And I got a smaller house, so I had less things to clean and less things to take care of. And I got rid of lots and lots of jobs that I didn't want anymore. And then that's what gave me the free time to make art. It gave me the free time to study a language and travel and do the things I want to do. And I realized when I was using my time the way everybody else was, I was just as busy, but I wasn't busy doing things that were enhancing my life and making me happy. But nobody questioned it because that's what everybody else was doing. When I stopped doing those things and started doing things that made me happy, sometimes someone would find out that I learned Italian, like, well, how do you have time for all that? Or I made furniture. Well, how do you have time for that? They would ask me in a way that almost acted as if I was stealing from somebody, like I was doing something wrong, you know, like it just seems like you have all this time. How do you have time to do this and that? You just, I'm like, cause I don't rake leaves anymore. I don't cut the grass anymore. And, you know, and I got rid of all the expenses that go along with that too. You know, there's all those, when you have to have a lawnmower and all the things you have to have, that all consumes a lot of money, which means that you have to work more to get the money to buy the things to take care of the things. It's a trap.
Yeah. And it is again a society believes that you must be active, you must be very busy. Like if you have time, it means like you are a lazy man and you are like a loser, you know, like like this. Oh yeah, you know, I remember that story you told in your book, like when you were pressing olive oil, you know, and you were tired, but you were like a child, so happy of this process and so on. So yeah, this is a process when you laugh, it make you more more energetic. Yeah. And
yeah, I read somewhere that maybe it's true everywhere, but the author, the interview was here in the US, and the person said Americans confuse pleasure with happiness. Like the thing that we have to be doing something pleasurable to be happy. So eating chocolate or pizza or whatever. But the author was really accurate when they said a lot of times the things that make us happiest may not be pleasurable in the moment. They might be really, really difficult or really hard or challenging. Like Like sometimes intense exercise can be hard and even painful, but it makes you happy because you know how it makes you feel afterwards, or you're getting, you're building yourself to be stronger. Or sometimes when I was writing, it was difficult and I was like really took a lot of mental energy and I was tired afterwards, but it made me happy. And yeah, the same thing with the olive oil. um that's a I don't know if you want me to tell that story. It's kind of a fun story. It's an example of just the same kind of way that you and I met. But like I went to Italy to take some intensive language classes. And while I was there, the hosts and hostess of the bed and breakfast where I was staying were asking me, well, why are you? Because I really went far to the south of Italy where not many tourists go. And I went there because my teacher recommended, that's where she's from. And also not many people there speak English. So I knew I would get to practice a lot. And so this couple was asking me, well, why are you here? I mean, in a nice way. And why do you speak Italian? And I told them like, well, my grandparents are from Italy and I'm trying to learn Italian so I can understand my heritage and of my grandparents. And then they got really excited and they started asking me all kinds of questions like, well, where are you from? Like, oh, I'm from Sicily. And like, oh, Sicily and southern Italy were part of the same kingdom at one point. And they treated me like we were cousins and they kept asking me questions. And then pretty soon they showed me the table, some food came with the rental of this place. And the man, Emilio, made the olive oil that was sitting on the table. So then I was curious about that because I've always found that whole process interesting, this thing that people have been doing for thousands of years. And I'm talking to someone that knows how to do it. And so we talked about olive oil for 20 minutes. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go harvest olives next week if you want to join me. I'm like, yes, please, And it was almost, I mean, it was more of a religious experience than I've had in church. I'm like standing on this hilltop and I could see the sea, and I'm surrounded by these ancient olive trees. And there's this little stone house that was there, and we ate a meal under the trees, and then went and worked for, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. And it was hard work. I was tired, but it was so. Hey, there's your cat.
Very similar, yeah, you see.
Yeah, same markings and same eyes.
Sorry, just it.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, so that was a good example of like, I was tired, and some of my Italian friends were like, you offered to do that for free? Like, people will get paid to do that, or it's hard, that's hard work. And yeah, but for me it was, I want to do it again. Maybe next fall I might go do it. So
so now you are planning your next trip to Italy, yeah, right?
Yeah, I want to go back. There are these, well, what'd you say, 4 languages, when you learn another language, as you get different insights into the culture, and you learn new ways of saying things that you maybe can't say in your own language. And I love art and history, and so I found an art history language class that I'm going to take in Rome.
Yeah, so nice, so cool that you can do that.
Charlemagne that said, whoever speaks 2 languages has 2 souls.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the same thing. I speak German too, so German was the second language I learned, and I studied that when I was, in high school and college, and I didn't start learning Italian until about 5 years ago. And I noticed pretty quickly how different how I felt when I spoke Italian versus even German. Like the culture is infused in the language, and the like with Italian, I feel like I'm trying to sing. It's so melodic, and there's more range in the way you use your voice. And German and English are more similar. They're more monotone, I guess. after I got done with making furniture, I started doing improvisational theater.
Okay.
And I really noticed a big similarity between what I was doing with my acting, and then as I was trying to learn this language, that I kind of had made that connection too, that I was like, it feels very much like, okay, you're stepping into another culture. I think when you're able to do that, then you understand it better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it affects how we speak, and the emotion with which we speak affects our emotion, affects our emotions and our internal feelings. And um we'll never understand everything entirely from the perspective of another culture, but you keep stepping into that deeper. And it's, I don't know, it's fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, right. I must ask you, as I'm an artist and you are an art lover, tell me please, how does art affect you in maybe in your journey, as like, because we are talking about your journey and about your awakeness, yeah, to say like, because you wrote it in your book, how you make art and so on. But can you tell me more about these stories, like when you wanted art, in your life?
Okay. Yeah, there's been a few things. There was the first part of me learning to make art.
Mm-hmm.
And I was making practical art, I guess, art that I could use, and that just gave me a sense of joy and freedom, and like you said, tapping into that inner child of like, I can play and I can try things and I can experiment, like when you're little and you make Legos and or play with Play-Doh. It's whatever you want it to be. You can find so much joy in that, versus so much of the rest of my world before all that was trying to not be myself, trying to be who society wanted me to be. How I was in the world of finance, so I had to dress a certain way, and I had to have my hair cut in a certain way, and I had to drive a certain kind of a car, and I had to talk about certain things. And at my I was, and I sometimes would look around, I'm like, that doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel like me. So there was the first part of actually creating art that helped me in my healing process. And then when I had my new home that I was putting together after my divorce, I had all these empty walls. And I told this story about the Picasso print that I found. Yeah. So like, I was in the store that sold used things, secondhand things, and I found this Picasso print of Don Quixote, and I immediately saw that, and it was Don Quixote dressed in his armor on his horse with was it Sancho, his assistant, going off to have an adventure. And I saw myself in there, and I'm like, it made me feel like, because I felt like I had to be brave, and I had to fight all these things that were this voice, the Santa voice that was in myself telling me, you can't make art. How dare you? And you can't not have a yard. And I was fighting myself, that everything in my childhood and society that had told me how to live, I was still fighting me a bit. So that piece of art gave me this sense of like courage. I'm like, oh, I want that is going to remind me to stay on my path. And in that moment, I decided I want the art in my house to tell me stories. And so almost everything I've bought, there were some things it took me years to get the things I have, but the things that I bought because they remind me to be strong, and they remind me to stay on my path, or they remind me that what I'm doing makes a difference. And so it was almost like the way the murals in a church are designed to tell stories. I wanted to create that. I was creating a sanctuary for myself, and I was like, I want the art in my home to be meaningful or inspiring and remind me to stay on my path. And so that's how art impacted my home. And then studying art, I'm inspired. I didn't realize it at the moment, but every time I studied the life of an artist, I studied the life of someone many times who was going against what society wanted them to do. Leonardo couldn't, he was born outside of his father's marriage. And so Da Vinci wasn't his last name. That was where he was from, the town of Vinci. He couldn't have his father's last name because he was a bastard. Mm-hmm. But that freed him. If he had been born legitimately, he would have been a notary. Mm-hmm. You know what that is? Like where he verifies documents. So that, imagine Leonardo the notary. Right? And so he couldn't do his family's career because he was born out of wedlock. And then Michelangelo's father was mad at him because he wanted him to be, he viewed being a sculptor as like beneath the family's station, and that, working with your hands is that was a shameful thing. And so many artists, or they did, Picasso, his father wanted him to be a teacher and wanted him to paint classically, and he's like, nope, I'm gonna go to Paris and I'm gonna live with the Bohemians and learn this new thing. And so not only their art is interesting and beautiful, but just people that would work so hard to do something different and push against society, or all the times Caravaggio's paintings, he was painting for the richest, wealthiest people in society in Rome, but then he was painting the saints as poor common people. And so because of that, he angered a lot of his patrons because they didn't want the saints to look like everybody else. They wanted the saints to look like them. And this person that was just flaunting his patrons because he could. So there's just multiple reasons that, and then there's so much. And I love studying art history because you see kind of the progression of humanity, and art tells stories of things that were happening in the time, and this progression of human consciousness is kind of wrapped up in all that.
Yeah. Do you still have that painting on your wall?
I do. It's right by my front door, and I see it every time I leave the house, and I love it.
So, okay, Carlo, tell me please how you came up to create your podcast, and how you came up to invite people to what is the background of this idea?
Oh, okay. Actually, I had an idea to do a podcast before I wrote the book. Uh-huh. And so I wanted, so I'd worked in finance for years. Mm-hmm. And after I'd learned all these lessons, I really saw that if a person didn't know who they were and what they wanted, it didn't matter how much money they had in life, they weren't going to be happy. Mm-hmm. If they didn't know those fundamental things. And I wanted to do a podcast for my work that dove into some of those things. But in my old business, there's this thing called compliance, where there's these lawyers and they monitor everything you do and say, and they made it so difficult because they wanted me to, they said, well, you need to submit the script of what you're going to talk about beforehand. I'm like, I'm just going to have conversations with people. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't understand that because they were used to people getting on there and talking about stocks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So finally they just said, well, why don't you just do a podcast, or why don't you just do this as an activity that's separate from your finance business? So I thought about it. I'm like, okay. So I talked to some friends that know about podcasts, and they helped me see that I didn't have a real clear focus. Mm-hmm. So someone suggested, well, maybe you should write a book. I'm like, well, okay. Well, so I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll write a book. I hired a lady who's a coach, and she helped me really focus my message. And then I took that outline and wrote my book. And while she was editing the book, it became clear to me. I'm like, oh, okay. So the podcast is called It's the Journey, because like it's about, it's the journey, not the destination. And so I'm like, I want to talk to other people that are doing this, because again, I'm not trying to highlight myself as being this coach and this know-it-all. Along my journey, I've met all these amazing people, and if I keep doing the things I want to, I'll keep meeting more interesting people. So it gives me a reason to talk with fun people. Like, you and I would never have spoken if I hadn't had that as an opportunity. It's like I've been able to connect with so many fun and interesting people, and even people that I knew before. Even people I knew before I did the podcast, we got to sit down and just talk about their journey for an hour. And I was like, I've learned so much about you that I didn't know, or I didn't know why you do this or that. So yeah, the idea just came from like, I just want to share people's stories. There's so much negative news right now, negativity, and then or like on social media, there's so much sort of like fake happiness and fake positivity or fake perfection. I wanted to share people's journeys and the good parts and the bad parts and the tough parts, to help inspire other people to just say yes to whatever is holding them back. I think it's Thoreau. He said most men live lives of quiet desperation. So I did for a long time, and I wanted to just provide something positive to help people live the life they want.
Yeah, you really do. Your podcast is really very useful, and inspiring.
That we can live in a time where you can literally find and connect with people all over the world. And it also just, that example over and over and over again, is like, we're all human. We're all having this human experience. And how many times, like, we've found common, we've had, similar life experiences, even though we live on opposite sides of the world. Right. And so many of the world's problems would be solved if human beings just understood each other more and just talked and shared some laughs together and had some fun and some food.
Can you tell me what your core value is as a person, as a writer, as a person who inspires people, who talk to people, and in this way? However you want.
I'm just trying to think. The word that came to mind, and I don't know. I feel. I don't know why I feel self-conscious saying it, but it feels like love. Like love is a core value. Like to love and take care of myself, and then love and take care of my family, and then love and try to understand as much as I can. That it sounds corny. But that's, I love to learn and I love to understand. And I think part of that comes from a place of love. So if I had to list one, I think that would be it.
Yeah. So thank you, really. My core value is probably to stay myself always, and to listen to myself, and not to lose myself, not to lose my inner child, somehow. I always want to be in this state of creating, of playing, life, not to be so like rusty and so on, like always to be in a process which I love somehow.
That feels good. It feels good to like be learning and growing and engaging in life. Because otherwise it's like you're decaying. You're either growing or you're dying. And you can grow and learn our whole lives. And so that's interesting you said that about, not to lose yourself.
I feel,
because that was
I feel
that was a big fear of mine as I began to say yes to myself and I began to build my life. It was doing things a lot of things that were very different than than the people in my life. And I was so scared of losing it. I was so scared that I would meet somebody and they would not let me live the way I wanted to, or I was scared that I would give it up for some reason. And I'm not scared of that anymore, but because now I know who I am and I'm just doing my things. And, but it's something I'm mindful of. I'm just like checking in. I'm like, is this even the podcast? I don't want it. I've promised myself I'm going to do it as long as it's fun. If it stops feeling fun, if it starts feeling like it's a chore and I'm just doing it just because and worrying about likes on social media and all that stuff, then I'm going to stop it and I'm going to dive into something else. So
this is so perfect position, I think that why you should to how to say to push yourself or to do things what doesn't inspire you anymore. For what reason? It's like why you should do that? No. Just enjoy the journey, and that's all. And this is very interesting, because when you start to be yourself and when you start step your journey, other people, they see a natural you and they see how enjoyable you are, and how you can be like a child, like an artist, like a designer, like a traveler, like a explorer, like a olive oil pusher or maker, and so on, and as you said, like your sons, they saw example. You were like a good example for them, like go out the box and step on your journey, and it's perfect example.
Both my kids have done things and are doing things that I know they wouldn't have otherwise. I gave that example in my book. Was my younger son one day the kids saw me making things, and my older son started doing computer programming, and he's like, I'm gonna make a video game. And so he's working to make a video game, and then his little brother wanted to learn how to make a video game, and he asked me, and I don't know anything about programming. That's not my and his older brother he was not at an age where he wanted to teach his little brother how to do programming. So I knew my younger son was super creative, and so he loved to draw. And so I bought him a portfolio of just a blank notebook, and I'm like, well, why don't you draw the pictures of your video game and write out the storyboard? And so we went on a vacation, and every time there was a spare moment, he was there drawing, and he filled up every single page with all the characters, and he drew out maps of the whole world and what they're these, fighters, so what their armor looked like and what their weapons look like, and descriptions of every aspect of it. And I was blown away. I'm like, well, I guess. But he got done with it, and he said, I think I want to turn this into a story. So he wrote like an 80,000 word book about these robots and this whole world that they lived in. And he was 12 when he did that. And I was just blown away. And both of them just keep doing things that I know, that are, because they saw, I gave them permission by my example, and that makes me happy. That makes me happy because, like, again, like I started at the beginning of saying, like, my mom was doing the best she could, but the example she gave me was, you aren't living to be happy. You live to work, and you set aside the fun things and don't do those. So.
It's so natural when kids explore what they want,
their talents,
talents and so on, because they can try something like, I want to be an artist, and then they can to start painting or drawing, or next day maybe they can say, no, I want to be a musician, and to create a music. Okay, so you can to try. Maybe you would not like this, okay, but you must try. It's perfect example, like you can try, just to try. and just watch. You love it or no. And if you love it, you can do that. And if you're not, just leave it. And so
It's okay. Yeah.
and it's okay. Nobody is not watching like Santa or God and so on. Like you are watching yourself, and you are finding your inner voice. Yeah. So it's
Exactly. You know, I think a lot of times when we grow up and we become good at something, then like children aren't afraid to be bad at stuff. If they'll try to draw and write and make music and play a game or whatever, and they'll fall and fall and fall, and they don't have an ego that it, because everything they're learning is brand new. They're learning to speak, and they're learning to talk and walk and draw. And we get to a certain point in our lives and people become afraid of looking bad or looking stupid or looking, they're a professional, like I'm a, whatever they do for a living, they've gained a mastery of it. So they're afraid of looking like they're not good or not smart. And especially like with, you know, whether there's music or art, but like language, some people are very afraid of not sounding intelligent. And or not having the words to use or whatever, so they are afraid to try to speak a different language because of that fear. And it's the internal judgment. That's it. You know, when you the first time I went to Italy, I had only studied for 5 months, and so I was at a very, very basic level, but everybody was so sweet and kind to me because I was trying, and they worked so hard. We worked really hard to understand each other, and I made lots of mistakes, and I said things, and I still do. I still make lots of mistakes, but it's okay. And it's just so yeah, you have to be okay to be bad at something. The fun part in Italian is it's like sometimes, like if a word has just one letter, like if it has, let's say 2 P's versus 1 P or 1 N versus 2 N's, it completely changes the meaning. So I've accidentally discovered almost all the bad words by mispronouncing them. and nobody's offended. They laugh. It's hysterical because I'm like a child that says the wrong thing, and I'm like saying it very seriously, and they're like, no, don't say it that way, say it this way.
Okay, you're a good student, you know.
Exactly. And people, that's it. People appreciate that you care enough about their language and culture to try. That's all we can do is try. So, and you know, being in touch with your inner child. I've often felt that way about myself as I'm learning a language. I'm like, you're speaking in the beginning, you're speaking when you first start, you're speaking like a child, and then you're searching for the right words, or you're searching for how to say something. And it's a really strange thing as an adult when you like, I know I could express this in my language. How do I do that with the knowledge I have? And sometimes I find myself like I want to go from point A to point B, but I have to go around this way in order to because this is the way I can phrase it with the vocabulary I have right now.
I remember you told me that story about honey, in Italian language. Honey.
I couldn't remember the word for honey, so I was like, the fruit of the bee. And my teacher thought about it. She's like, oh, that's beautiful. It's like, that's poetry. And I'm like, well, thank you. I was just, I didn't want to ask, how do you say honey? So I described it, and she knew what I meant.
And you know, we always want to be perfect, but sometimes unperfect you seems more interesting that you would be a perfect, you know, in your language.
Exactly. Yeah, you're hearing, or even I've read that Arnold Schwarzenegger works to keep his accent because that's such a part of who he is. I don't know if that's true or not, but that the accent and the way of phrasing things and saying things, it's a piece of who we are.
So thank you, Carlo, for such a nice conversation. You know, maybe it's the last questions of our today, like formal conversation. You know, I would like to know what message do you want people take away from your experience and from your all this journey you go. You know, like.
Yeah, the most important thing I think is just, you know, we're here on this tiny little speck of dust floating through space, and we have a short time, and we don't know how much that is. And I think it's important to like live intentionally and listen to what's inside you, and try to just try to you know, listening to what is inside of you, and do those things, and be happy, and try to do some good in the world. Because when you do that, when we live our dreams and we live on purpose, it sets an example for everybody around us, and it opens up connections and pathways to people and opportunities that you can't see when you're just doing what you think you're supposed to. And so yeah, that I think that's the biggest thing. It's just and when we say yes to what we want, then we're saying no to other things. So if like you want to be more free, or you want to travel more, then you're saying no to things that might tie you down, or relationships that might tie you down. So listen to that, and then don't be afraid to have your back, and trust yourself to follow that dream. So
Yeah, this so powerful messages, really. Thank you. And you know, when you talk about your journey and about your goals on this journey, you talk it's very serious things, but you talk it's like a child, you know. You talk very serious, but this is a vibe from you, like always be like a child and to be on this journey, right?
yeah, I mean, it's just when you do, because like for so many years I you know, I felt like I was wearing a mask, and I was being who I thought I was supposed to be. And when I learned to just be Carlo, life became much more fun.
Yeah.
And so like, but and we all know what that is, but it's like sometimes it's buried deeper than other times. But just be in touch with like the things that brought you joy when you were a kid, and that's a big hint to why we're here, and what you should be doing.
Thank you for your book.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Afterlife, and it's such a powerful gift for me.
Yeah, no, I was so glad that I could send it to you, and I really appreciate you, and you inspire me, and you make such beautiful things, and it's powerful that you are sharing that with the world. And so I'm grateful that somehow we connected and we're able to spend some time together.